Okay, so today we're going deep on some stuff coming right out of the White House from this recent press briefing, and well, let's just say they covered a lot of ground.
Oh, yeah, they did not hold back.
No, they really didn't.
Hmm.
We've got economic updates, some serious talk about military action in the Red Sea, an executive order all about election integrity, and well, a whole lot of back and forth about a certain messaging app.
Sounds like a pretty typical day.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So as always, we're going to try to sort through all this and see what really stands out, what's really important, for everyone to understand.
Right, break it all down.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just dive right in.
Sounds good.
All right. So first up, the economic news. They're talking about trillions of dollars in investments, private and foreign investments since Inauguration Day.
Trillions with a T.
Yeah, a pretty huge number, right?
Yeah.
And they even highlighted some specific companies like Schneider Electric. They're planning to invest over $700 million in U.S. energy infrastructure and AI. That's
Yeah,
pretty significant.
definitely. And then there's Hyundai with their $20 billion investment plan, a new steel plant in Louisiana, something like 1,500 jobs, supposedly high-paying ones.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. And their whole point is that, uh, this is proof that America is becoming a manufacturing superpower again.
Right, bringing it all back.
Yeah. So what do you think about all this? I mean, are these claims legit?
Well, it's definitely interesting that they're giving these specific examples, right? It makes it seem a lot more real than just talking about, general economic trends. But I think the important thing to think about is, are these actually new investments?
Oh, you mean like maybe they were already in the works?
Exactly. Or maybe they're, kind of re-announcing things that were already planned. It's also important to look at, which sectors are actually growing the most, because
Right.
that tells you a lot more about where the economy is really heading.
Makes sense. So it's not just about the big numbers.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
You got to dig a little deeper.
Okay. So speaking of digging deeper, they also talked uh, about some upcoming tariffs on the auto industry.
Oh, yeah, Liberation Day, they called it.
Right. And the whole point they say is to make trade more fair, stop other countries from taking advantage of American workers and ultimately bring manufacturing back to the U.S., which they say will lead to higher wages.
It's a familiar argument for sure.
Yeah. And this is all happening, while they're also planning these tax cuts later this year. So they're painting a pretty rosy picture of the economy.
They are. But then, right in the middle of all this, they mentioned that consumer confidence is at a 4-year low.
Yeah, that kind of stuck out to me too.
Right, because on the one hand, you've got these big investments, the tariffs. These are all things that are supposed to have like a long-term impact.
Yeah.
But then you've got this consumer confidence index, which is basically how people are feeling about the economy right now. And, well, it's not looking so good.
So people aren't really buying it.
Not at the moment, anyways. So I think the big question here is, how are all these, long-term strategies actually going to affect people's everyday lives, their finances? How long will it take for these, big investments in these trade policies to actually make a difference for the average person?
Yeah, that's the real test, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so moving on from the economy, we also had National Medal of Honor Day. President Trump met with 21 recipients of the Medal of Honor, called them, the nation's bravest heroes, incredible patriots.
It's a powerful moment, to acknowledge that kind of sacrifice and bravery.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they moved on to announce what they called a historic executive order, all about election integrity.
This seems to be a big priority for them.
Yeah, it does. So they said that a main goal is to make sure that only citizens are voting and to stop foreign countries from meddling in our elections.
Okay, so voter verification and preventing foreign interference.
Right? They called them common sense solutions, the kind of thing that only Democrats would oppose.
Hmm.
And they said this is all about restoring confidence in our elections.
Interesting. So they're framing this as something that's, widely supported, necessary to protect the voting process.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
And they even hinted that there might be more coming, on election integrity. Maybe things like same-day voter registration or hand-counted paper ballots.
Well, that would certainly shake things up.
Yeah, it would. So it seems like this is something they're going to keep talking about.
For sure.
Okay, so now for the part of the briefing that really got everyone talking about the whole controversy about using the Signal app.
Ah, yes, the messaging app.
Yeah. This all started because of a report in the Atlantic magazine about some internal White House messages.
Right, some leaked messages.
Right. So the White House response was basically, well, first they said that the National Security Advisor accidentally added a reporter's phone number to a group chat.
Okay, a little bit of a slip up.
Yeah, and then they very strongly denied that any classified information was shared in these messages.
Hmm.
They specifically said that things like, locations, sources, methods, war plans, none of that was in there.
So damage control right away.
Totally. And here's the interesting part. They actually argued that The Atlantic publishing these messages proves that they're telling the truth.
How do they figure that?
Well, their logic is that if they were trying to hide something, they wouldn't have let these messages get out in the first place.
Okay, so a bold strategy.
Yeah, it is. And they didn't stop there.
Yeah.
They went on to accuse Democrats and the mainstream media of basically making up a whole misinformation campaign.
Okay, so shifting the blame.
Yeah, and they even called out Jeffrey Goldberg, the writer of the Atlantic article. They brought up a bunch of his past reporting that they claimed was false or misleading, like stuff about weapons of mass destruction, the Russia hoax, and some things about Gold Star families.
So they're trying to discredit him, basically.
Exactly. And they said that this whole signal hoax is just the latest example of him, making stuff up.
I see. So attack the messenger.
Right. Then they went on to defend Signal itself.
Right.
They said it's an approved encrypted app that the government uses all the time. The Department of Defense, the State Department, the CIA.
Right. Trying to make it seem like a totally normal thing to use.
Yeah, exactly. And they said that the Secretary of Defense himself confirmed that no classified information was sent through Signal.
Okay, so appealing to authority.
Right. They described the messages as just a policy discussion. A sensitive one, but still just a discussion between high-level officials.
Downplaying the significance.
Yeah. But then when reporters asked specifically about, whether certain details in the messages could be classified, like launch times or weapons details, they wouldn't really answer directly.
So dodging the question a bit.
Kind of. They just kept referring back to what the Secretary of Defense had said, emphasizing what was not in the messages.
Interesting.
Yeah. And they even said that it comes down to who you trust more, the Secretary of Defense or Jeffrey Goldberg.
Right. So putting the public in a position where they have to choose sides.
Exactly. And to try to reassure everyone, they also said that they take the safety of American service members extremely seriously and that nobody's going to lose their job over this whole Signal thing.
So no heads rolling.
Nope. They said they still have full confidence in their national security team. And then they mentioned that the National Security Council, the White House counsel's office, and even Elon Musk's team are all looking into how that reporter's number ended up in the chat in the first place.
Wow, bringing in the big guns.
Right. It seems like they're really trying to, get to the bottom of it.
Definitely trying to show that they're taking it seriously.
Yeah. Okay, so last thing on the Signal topic. There was a question about the vice president being frustrated with Europe's role in policing waterways, like the Suez Canal.
Ah, yes, that whole situation.
Right. And they shared President Trump's view, which is basically that Europe has been freeloading and that they need to pay their fair share.
So a familiar theme.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so moving on to the last big thing from the briefing, the military action against Houthi terrorists.
Right, a significant development.
Yeah, so they said that President Trump ordered these operations back on March 15th. The goal was to protect American ships in the Red Sea, make sure that ships can move freely, and basically protect the U.S. from any threats.
Protecting American interests.
Exactly. And they said that they hit dozens of targets in territory controlled by the Houthis.
Dozens. So we're not getting exact numbers here.
No. And they said that several Houthi leaders were killed, including their drone chief, his deputy, and some other drone experts.
Okay, so taking out key figures.
Yeah, and they also said they destroyed command and control centers, places where they make weapons, and storage sites for advanced weapons.
So a pretty comprehensive operation.
Yeah, and they made a point of saying that all of this was necessary because of what they called Joe Biden's incompetence and pathetic weakness on the world stage.
Strong words.
Yeah, they were not holding back. They criticized the Biden administration for taking the Houthis off the list of foreign terrorist organizations back in 2021.
Yeah.
They said that just made the Houthis bolder.
Okay, so blaming the previous administration.
Right. And they listed a whole bunch of things that the Houthis have done, like attacking U.S. military ships and planes, hitting commercial ships, even ones with American flags threatening personnel attacking our allies. They said all of this has really messed with global trade, through the Suez Canal, the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden.
So painting a picture of a serious threat to international stability.
Right. And they said that President Trump is the one who's putting a stop to all this, restoring American strength. They called it the Trump peace through strength approach.
A catchy slogan.
Yeah. And of course, they accused Democrats and the media of focusing on chaos instead of recognizing how successful this military action has been. They even said that these first 2 months of President Trump's term have been the most successful of any administration ever.
A bold claim.
Yeah, and they said that they've carried out over 100 strikes against Houthi targets, hitting leaders,
Yeah.
air defense systems, command centers, headquarters, weapons facilities. And they said that they're going to keep going until ships can move freely again.
So a clear message of resolve.
Definitely.
Yeah.
They also compared how they're handling this to how the previous administration dealt with it, but they didn't really give any specifics.
Right. So leaving it up to people to fill in the blanks.
Yeah. Okay. So, wow, that was quite a press briefing. We covered a lot of ground, from the economy and all the talk about tariff to the election integrity executive order, that whole thing of the Signal app, and then all the details about the military action against the Houthis.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. And, when you look at it all together, it's pretty clear that the administration is trying to present a very specific message. They're talking about economic progress through investments and trade deals, about taking decisive action on the world stage, about making our elections more secure. And at the same time, they're really pushing back against anyone who criticizes them or questions their agenda.
So shaping the narrative, controlling the message.
Exactly. And I think it's important for everyone to think about, all the different pieces of information they're giving us and how these things all fit together, what their overall strategy is.
Right, because there's always more to the story.
Yeah, there always is. So here's something for everyone to think about. Given everything we've talked about today, from how they communicate at the highest levels of government, to the reasons they give for taking military action, to the different ways people are talking about the economy, what does all this tell you about how decisions are made in Washington? How information is controlled? What else do you want to learn about after hearing all of this? That's what we want you to think about. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Always a pleasure.